Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Hey guys, it's Emily, the controversial mom, here to combine two of my favorite topics, the church and politics. I know everybody hates combining them, and we've been told our entire lives never bring politics into the church. But that is wrong, and I am going to prove why. As always, I have my notes ready. First of all, let's talk about what a chaotic week it has been. Not only just in my personal life has it just been chaotic, and I have been all over the place, my work life has also been chaotic, but also the world is just crazy and chaotic. This past week, probably 2 weeks, has really and truly, and I say this all the time, been unprecedented, but that's just kind of the world we're in right now with Trump in his second term. I think for most of us that consider ourselves grassroots, we really appreciate how Trump's just come in really hot and ready to go. He's really done this differently than what most people do, where they come in and they talk a lot and they don't necessarily take a lot of action. Trump's did the exact opposite this go round. He's talked very little and he's done a whole lot. We're not even 90 days into his second term, and he's already signed more executive orders thus far in his presidency than any other president before him. And I know I spent a good bit of time a few weeks ago talking through what those executive orders look like, but the ones that really stick out in my head, and a lot of this just has to do with the fact that I focus a lot on education, but the ones that really stick out in my head are the ones that deal with the radical ideology in public schools, the keeping men out of women's sports, and then one that defines male and female. Those are really the 3 big ones for me. There's a ton of other ones that are extremely important, but for what I do on a daily basis, those are the 3 that really just were the most impactful. On top of all the executive orders, but especially those 3, there was also something called a Dear Colleague letter that went out on the 14th of February. And yes, I can remember the date because it was Valentine's Day. It makes it easy. But essentially, this Dear Colleague letter was a next level on the executive order. It told all public school systems across the country they had 14 days to get rid of all DEI related programs, curriculum, activities, anything and everything that touched DEI. They had to get rid of it within 14 days, which meant by the end of February, they had to get this stuff out of the school systems or potentially lose federal funding. That obviously caught my attention, and I quickly emailed our state superintendent and our state board members to let them know how big of an issue this is because DEI is so deeply embedded in so many things within our school systems. But they had until the 14th or to the 28th of February to get rid of it. All across the country, schools had to do this. And if they didn't get rid of it, thankfully, Tiffany Justice, a co founder of Moms for Liberty, worked with the Trump administration and the Department of Education, and they established what is basically a reporting mechanism for parents. I think the actual website is called ndei.gov. Um, Google it, you'll find it. But basically, what it does is it allows parents to report DEI in the public school systems that the schools are not getting rid of. Now, the website went live at the end of February. I can attest to you personally that it worked because I used it. Here's where things get a little squirrely for me. It doesn't work now. It worked for like a day. I went back to fill out a secondary complaint for a different school system, and the site didn't work. It allowed me to put everything in, and when I would hit submit, it said something like access denied or something. I can't remember. But thankfully, I'm in a position where I could screenshot it and I could send it to some of my counterparts that are at the national levels of Moms for Liberty so they could push that over to Tiffany. And hopefully, she can pass that along to whoever's working the website on the government side and figure out what's going on. I tried different web browsers, I used different computers, I did all the things thinking maybe I did something wrong, and I got the same message every time. So for me, being slightly conspiratorial, I kind of questioned whether or not it was intentional or not intentional that this website went down after like a day. Hopefully, I'm wrong and it's just a little bug and they get it fixed quick. But it really got my mind going on, is this what we can expect for the next 4 years? And of course, the answer is yes, because really and truly, there are so many actors out there that are against Trump's agenda and what the American people have asked for. So as I kind of went through this experience with the DEI thing, I started going back through this chaotic news cycle we've had for the past week or two. The other things that came to mind that really just made me kind of scratch my head was activist judges as we're dealing with these executive orders. We've seen these executive orders extremely far reaching in terms of what they do, whether it's border security, whether it's education, whatever it may be, they're very broad reaching. And immediately we see pushback from people. Let's go back to the USAID situation. People are being fired, they're upset, they start filing complaints, and judges step in to say, well, this is unconstitutional, it's illegal, Trump doesn't have the power to do this executive order is nonsense, you don't have to follow it. I mean, there was even one instance where judges were writing articles of impeachment. Hello, separation of powers, anybody? Like, who do these judges think they are? But this is what we can expect. Anytime Trump does something legally, we're going to have activist judges coming out to try and curtail everything that he's working on. Then we fast forward to the Epstein files. How many years have we been asking for the details behind Epstein files? We want to know the flight logs, who was on the planes, what did they do, how long were they there, how often did they go, all the things. So finally, Trump gets into office. He starts delivering on the promise. Pam Bondi and the entire Trump administration start pushing out this content of the Epstein files. I totally disagree with how they did it, but they did it nonetheless, only to find out in the end some rogue FBI agents withholding thousands of pages of documents and evidence. Thousands. That is so much information that the American people don't get to know because of some rogue agent or two. Like, this is crazy. This just shows how deep this movement is internal to our government to stop Trump from following through on his promises and being transparent with the American people. Then you've got the whole thing with the Doge and Elon Musk and the five bullets. Now, if you didn't follow this super close, and I'll admit I followed it somewhat closely, but not in super detail. But essentially, what happened is Elon Musk put out an email to all federal employees and said, respond back to this with five bullets of what you did last week. Now, what was really the purpose in this is to confirm that the person on the receiving end actually existed. It wasn't send me five bullets and I'm going to decide if you're fired or not. It truly was trying to document that the email address, the person on the receiving end, was actually a human being that still sat there and was alive and well for the most part. There were tons of responses all over social media, some of them pretty comical, but there was one in particular that stood out to me because it was a woman that said she was a retired federal employee, and she responded back to the email stating something stupid. I don't even know what the point was. But the point in that is you cannot be a retired federal employee and still have access to your email. So either she's lying, which is very possible, or two, she's collecting double payments here as an active employee and as someone retired. Because when you retire from the federal government, they cut off your email address. And I know this because I've sent emails to these people and I get an email back that says, this email address is no longer available. So this woman couldn't be a retired employee and still have an active email address. So either she's lying, which is possible, or she's getting double payments, which is the entire point in the Doge process, is to identify this fraud, waste, and abuse. But of course, it gets spun around to where Trump and Elon are like this dual dictatorship and they're just firing people haphazardly. And through all of that, you've got this crazy guy within the DOD. I'm pretty sure he sits at the Pentagon in some very senior HR level position. He sends out an email to people and says, don't respond to the email. So Pete Hegseth runs the DOD now. He's SecDef. Pete is lockstep with Trump and his agenda. But within his realm of control, Pete's got this one guy that's basically like undoing and undermining everything that Trump is trying to do with reducing the number of federal employees. So again, we've got great things going on with the Trump administration, but you've got these bad actors embedded within that are really curtailing what Trump's fighting for. So it's very frustrating for those of us that have fought so hard to get Trump into office. I personally went and door knocked for Trump. Some of my friends went with me. We were very dedicated to getting Trump into office, not because we wanted the Epstein files, not because we wanted to reduce the workforce, of the federal government, but because we supported the agenda that Trump was pushing forward. So it's very frustrating now that Trump's in office and we're seeing all these obstacles and all these roadblocks put in place that prevent Trump from delivering on the things that we all worked so hard to get him into office for. So then fast forward, I go to church this week. And of course, nothing is coincidence. So I always find this stuff so comical. Like God's humor is just hilarious to me. We sit down, and the sermon today is, or the sermon this week was about Revelations and being lukewarm for Christ. And I'm going to do a horrible job reciting the scripture. So I'm just not going to do it. But essentially, what it was is that God said, if you're a lukewarm Christian, he just spits you out because he doesn't want someone to be lukewarm for him. He wants everything about you. He wants you to be on fire for Christ, fighting down in the trenches, like evangelizing the world in his name. And as Pastor Seth is going through all of this in scripture, like in my mind, it keeps replaying back all these things that are going on in our country, all the things that we're fighting for to protect our children from what's going on in public schools with indoctrination, what's going on in public libraries with this pornographic material, what's going on in the doctor's office where parents are being kicked out so doctors can have private conversations with 14-year-olds. It is infuriating what is happening in our country and how Christians are sitting quietly on the sidelines because we can't mix politics and church. We have to mix politics and church. If we are to do our Christian duty of going out and fighting for God's children, we have to get involved with politics. We do not have an option but to do that. And this goes back to being lukewarm. You cannot be lukewarm for Christ and keep allowing these things to happen in our country and in our state. So it's the middle of legislative session here in Alabama. So far, we've passed one bill that deals with any of the cultural or societal issues that we're facing in our state. And that was a very simple what is a woman bill. And that passed because of the executive orders from Trump and because Trump has come out so strongly for that. But what about everything else? What about raising the age of medical consent so 14-year-olds are not getting on or getting on the birth control pills without their parents knowing? What about getting gender ideology out of all of our public schools? What about getting pornographic material out of our public libraries? All things that should be an easy thing for a ruby red state like Alabama to get done. But yeah, we can't even get these bills out of the legislative committees. Like, this is ridiculous. And it's happening because we as Christians are being quiet and allowing it to happen. And that has to stop. We as Christians have to dig deep and get on fire for Christ and get on fire for our legislative process. We've got to get these bills passed. We've got to make sure that we're doing our duty to protect children, protect our rights as parents, so that we can uphold the Christian values at the toppest level in our society. So we've got about 20 days of legislative session left in Alabama. We've got to use our Christian voices and get this stuff done. We've got to use our Christian voices to get true grassroots conservatives elected next year. There's a lot of work to do, but we can't do it if we're lukewarm for Christ. We can't do it if we're lukewarm for the grassroots movement. So dig deep, find the fire inside of you, pray about it, call someone to pray about it with you. But you've got to find the fire inside you to be the Christian that goes out and fights for the political movement that protects your rights as a parent and protects the children in our communities. So spend the week digging deep, find what excites you, and get involved. See you next time.